The rooftop hadn't seen a fresh boot print in days. Wind rolled dust across the surface in soft spirals, collecting in shallow drifts along the broken concrete lip. Sunlight bounced off empty shell casings, faded brass catching in the glare. A crushed energy drink can rocked gently in place near the parapet, dented on one side like someone had tried to stomp it, but missed. No one had picked it up. No one had swept the roof. That alone made it perfect. Leah lay prone, wrapped in stillness that had nothing to do with fatigue, her body aligned with the barrel, elbows locked, cheek just touching the padded edge of her rifle stock. A homemade heat net stitched from camouflage strips and sun-bleached rags lay draped over the scope and part of her back. It didn't shimmer. It just blended. The shape of her didn't call attention. Neither did the rifle. It looked like discarded gear, forgotten long enough to fade. The desert city stretched out below, flat and pale and vibrating faintly with the shimmer of rising heat. At this distance, motion looked like memory. Shapes dissolved and reformed. Vehicles bled into the horizon and came back wrong. She'd measured the distortion the day before. The numbers were written in pencil along a piece of tape now wrapped around her bolt handle. Not for reference, just for rhythm. Her breath matched them. She hadn't asked for this perch. She hadn't been offered it either. The assignment roster listed her as support observer, radio diagnostics only. She was here because she said she was calibrating uplink response time. No one questioned that. No one cared enough to check. They had other things to think about. Teams on the centerline grid, main overwatch sectors stacked with proper snipers, targets flagged, call signs flying on the shared channel like parade banners. Her position was off map, not denied, just irrelevant. The name tape on her shoulder had worn half blank. It used to read Leah Hart. Now it read H. The second half had scraped off during a past rotation, somewhere between sandbags and rotors. She hadn't replaced it. The concrete beneath her ribs radiated warmth. She adjusted slightly, pulling her right knee back an inch, the motion smooth and practiced. Her scope stayed fixed, her reticle unmoved. There was no feed uplinked from her position, no telemetry. She hadn't synced it. She didn't want the chatter. She wanted the wind. She had been here before sunrise, built a firing solution before first light, etched a pencil mark into the concrete where the parapet lip met the eastern sightline. Her own anchor. Not for aim, she didn't need help with that, but for return, in case she had to look away, in case someone made her answer. She hadn't been on the active roster for 6 months. She hadn't asked to be reinstated either. After the joint exercise fallout, after she warned command their urban elevation protocol was too shallow by 12 meters and got told to mind her role, she stopped submitting corrections. She started watching instead. Most nights she trained alone, running target drifts off security cams, tracking rats through the alley corridors just to keep sharp. The rifle wasn't standard issue anymore. The barrel had been replaced. The trigger assembly had been filed down and tuned by hand. The bolt was smooth enough to cycle blindfolded. She had done it. In the barracks once. Then again in the dark. No one had logged her scope because no one had seen it. She brought it in disassembled, packed with other uplink equipment. Said she was rebalancing heat shimmer differentials for the West Relay. That had been 3 days ago. She'd been back every morning since. Quiet. Respectful, forgettable. The headset on her left ear hissed gently, tuned low enough to catch only primary channel bursts. She ignored the sideband links. Her eyes stayed on the road 2 blocks south, just past the old bus terminal. There was a wall there, pitted and half crumbled. The kind no one chose as cover but sometimes ended up behind. She was watching it, not for movement, for intention. Her breath slowed again. She adjusted nothing. The rifle stayed silent. The shadow line from the satellite dish behind her shifted a few inches across the rooftop gravel, marking the sun's path with unspoken precision. She didn't track it. She already knew the time. Somewhere in the lower quadrant of her lens, a shape resolved and shimmered back out. She didn't blink. She just waited. Voices began to rise on the shared comms channel. Not hers. Others. Call signs stepping on each other. Bravo 3 requesting new range input. Overwatch Command asking for confirmation from the West Grid. Sector Delta reporting late contact from Central Checkpoint. A rattle of urgency in every voice. Like something important had finally begun. Leah exhaled slowly, her cheek still resting against the worn fabric of the heat net. Her finger remained off the trigger, not because she doubted, because she was already ready. The hostage zone had no cover worth counting, just an open courtyard of cracked tile and broken concrete edged by low walls and rusted planters. 3 suspects stood in uneven formation, 2 close to the hostages, 1 standing slightly off axis, near a lamppost that had been bent at the base and then propped up with sandbags. It was the 3rd one who bothered her. He wasn't looking at the hostages. He was watching the rooftops. Leah adjusted the elevation dial of her scope by 2 notches, the click barely audible under the soft hiss of the comms. No one had asked for an adjustment. No one had asked her anything at all. On the shared channel, the voices were already layering over each other. Bravo team marking incomplete visuals, command cycling through range checks, someone in Delta sector calling for wind readouts they should have gathered an hour earlier. The man by the lamppost shifted slightly, not in step or boredom, but with calculation. His right boot slid back half a step, his head tilted a few degrees, not toward the hostage cluster, but toward the upper levels of the street facing west. She tracked his chin movement, not curiosity, search pattern. He knew Overwatch was up somewhere. He was just trying to find it. The heat shimmer lifted briefly. A pause in the midday distortion. The air flattened. Visibility sharpened. Leah's reticle steadied. She saw the sweat under the man's collar. Not a full stain. Just the thin crescent that formed when a man held still too long in a bad decision. His thumb twitched. Not nervous committed. She inhaled slowly and held it. Bravo's spotter came through with a partial confirmation. We've got 1 suspect looking offline, possibly scanning for rooftop coverage, requesting guidance. Another voice cut in. Do not engage. Stand by for profile match. Leah adjusted her eyes slightly to center the suspect's rifle. The barrel angle was wrong for posturing. It wasn't aimed low for intimidation or raised to gesture. It was hanging mid-center, half resting against the sandbags, tilted upward. The angle was shallow, too shallow for anything casual. It pointed somewhere near her block. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. The channel was still crowded with slow authority. A faint rattle came from the edge of her scope housing. The sunshade she'd built from salvaged rubber was loosening again in the rising heat. She reached up, tightened the lash with her thumb and forefinger, and returned to position without shifting her hips. Her cheek found the pad, again, aligned with the worn note card tucked just underneath. It held 4 lines of wind drift data. She didn't need it now. She just liked knowing it was there. No one else had seen it yet. Not like this. Not with the angle and the posture and the line between intention and act so close you could almost touch it. She remembered telling a classroom full of Overwatch trainees that the moment before the shot was the only one that mattered. Not the bullet, not the report, just the moment of certainty. Some of them had nodded. 1 or 2 even took notes. But a week later, she got reassigned from lead instructor to evaluator, then to field analyst, then to diagnostics. Her reports were too cautious. They said, her emphasis on delay, her methodical cadence too conservative. One memo used the phrase passive liability. She didn't contest it. She logged her final training recommendation, turned in her access key, and spent the next 3 weeks rewriting her own evaluation protocols from scratch. The suspect below adjusted his grip on the weapon. Not overtly, just enough to shift the balance. His back foot anchored. His eyes moved again, not toward the hostages, not toward the crowd, but toward her rooftop, or near enough that it didn't matter. She moved her finger toward the trigger housing, slowly, deliberately, not touching yet, just proximity. On the comms, another team began requesting drone readjustment. Visibility at range had dropped on the west axis. No confirmation of target behavior. They were still behind the curve. Leah had stopped depending on confirmation years ago. She didn't wait for permission. She waited for the pattern. The man below didn't know she was already there. He might have suspected. He might have even seen something on a previous recon run, a shadow, a lens flare, the suggestion of position. But what mattered now was that he had made his decision. His posture was ready. His weight was set. She remembered her father once showing her how to gauge the moment before a line cast, not by the rod or the wind or the fish, by the shoulder of the man holding the tension. It was always in the shoulder. He called it the breath before break. She was watching that same shoulder now. The suspect shifted again, this time not subtly. He brought his lead foot forward. The rifle lifted a fraction. No one else on comms registered the change. Leah's breath had already slowed. Her pulse did not rise. Her hands stayed loose. She had trained herself out of adrenaline years ago. Clarity came quieter now. She checked her own grip. She was aligned. The heat net moved slightly with the rise of her shoulder. The cloth tied around her bolt handle was old and sweat-stained, once part of her father's sleeve. She had kept it not for memory, but for texture. It gave her something real to hold with her offhand, something that didn't blink. The suspect below reached the end of his shift. The intention was now visible. The motion had started. The choice had been made. The comm still hadn't cleared the shot. Leah rested her finger gently near the trigger, waiting, just waiting. The motion started with a twitch, just a muscle pattern confirming everything she had already clocked. The suspect's rifle lifted not sharply, not theatrically, but with the weight of commitment. A half step followed, his elbow raised, his shoulder set. She watched it all unfold through the scope, already inside the rhythm of it. There was no acceleration, no hesitation. It wasn't a threat becoming real. It was real, becoming seen. The comms hadn't caught up. Someone was still asking Bravo 3 for a fresh angle. Another was marking a lag in the uplink signal. A tech operator was cycling resolution filters. The kill order wasn't coming. Leah didn't speak. She didn't flinch. Her breath drew in slow, paused, and then eased out. On the exhale, she tightened her finger. Not a pull, a compression. Clean, deliberate, familiar. The rifle bucked. A short sound, tucked under the ambient hum of heat and distance. The recoil was light. The follow-through, automatic. The suspect dropped as if clipped by gravity itself. No stagger, no scream, just a vertical collapse. It was over before anyone named it. None of the hostages were harmed. They froze first, then one stumbled. Another crouched behind a barrier of broken tile. One of the guards on the far edge of the courtyard spun in place, shouting orders that no one answered. The comms exploded. Who fired? Was that Delta? Negative. We didn't have visual. Bravo. Confirm your uplink. Did you authorize that shot? Repeat who took that round. Leah stayed still. The bolt on her rifle clicked softly as she cycled the chamber. She checked the spent casing, let it fall into the cloth catch pouch, and let the next round settle into place without pushing it forward. She didn't expect to need it. The rooftop returned to silence. Only her breath, measured and unbroken, filled the space between pulses. The echo of the shot faded quickly. In this dry heat, even consequences evaporated fast. Someone on the shared channel started triangulating the trajectory. The math didn't match any listed sniper position. Overwatch tried to pull drone footage. The delay was too long. Another voice on backup net suggested a misfire, a false positive. Then a radio tech corrected the angle. Shot came from the east quadrant block. Someone checked grid 17. That was her block. Below, the hostage team had begun to reposition. No injuries. No confirmation yet. Just the dust of a collapsed body curling into the sunlight. The hostages remained huddled but intact. No one had been touched except the one man Leah had seen coming. She didn't look for approval. She didn't need a replay. The geometry had been flawless. She had read his shoulder, read his timing, and timed her own breath to end it before command even finished the sentence. Leah leaned slightly back, letting the heat net shift off her cheek. Her mark, the pencil scratch she had carved into the ledge, lined up exactly with the patch of air now vacant. She didn't look away. She blinked once. Slow, deliberate. Let the image settle. Then her eyes returned to the optic. The rifle stayed cradled under her hands. The wind picked up slightly across the gravel. It blew grit across the top layer of the netting, into her sleeves, against the dry ridge of her knuckles. Her gloves stayed clipped to her belt, untouched. Someone on the ops channel demanded ID confirmation from all field snipers. No one claimed the shot. The silence that followed was thick, pulsing with friction. No one wanted to be the one to guess. The wrong name could cause a reprimand. The right one could rewrite the after-action report. A pause spread over the comms then, long enough to feel like understanding. One breath too late. Then another. Leah's finger hovered near the trigger guard again. Not resting. Not ready. Just returning. Her hands stayed loose. Her breath did not change. She had already come down from the decision. She had already returned to stillness. The man below remained motionless. A separate channel flickered online. Surveillance data confirmed impact trajectory. Ground sensors verified vertical collapse from east grid altitude. Command finally spoke. Kill order cleared. Repeat, cleared for lethal engagement. Priority target confirmed. No one answered right away. Leah didn't lift her head. Her voice didn't rise. She said the words without force. To no one in particular. Her tone was plain, nearly weightless. Too slow. She let the next breath carry that line out of her. Then, reset the bolt and waited again. Not because she needed to, because someone else might still be watching. And this time, they would be watching her. They found her still on the rooftop, not in position anymore, but standing quietly beside her rifle. The sling hung loose across her shoulder, gear cinched and packed. The netting was folded and laid flat against the parapet. Her hands, dusted in fine grit, moved slowly as she adjusted the scope cap and secured the latch. She had already broken down most of the setup by the time anyone came. The first to reach her was a junior officer, breath short from the stairwell. His boots crunched on gravel as he hesitated near the edge. He took one look at the dismantled position and the clean firing line to the courtyard below, then glanced back at Leah. His voice was clipped, sharper than it needed to be. You weren't cleared to fire. Leah didn't shift. She met his eye for just a moment, then turned back toward her pack. Her voice was calm, measured, and without edge. The shot was... The silence stretched. He didn't reply. It wasn't the kind of statement you could argue with, not after what he had seen. Over the comms, updates trickled in. Hostage team secure. All hostages accounted for. One suspect neutralized. No civilian injuries. Medical standby canceled. Threat contained. The list went on, each statement stacking until no one could argue the outcome. A few officers repeated the reports just to fill space, but no one added anything new. The facts had already landed. Behind the officer, another pair of boots scuffed the rooftop. A field tech with a data tablet scanned the rooftop angles, checked a set of coordinates, and tapped once. He looked toward the officer and said nothing aloud, but nodded once, then turned and whispered to the second tech beside him. She saw it before anyone even called it. The junior officer stepped forward again, quieter now. There was no uplink confirmation. No one had visual but you. Leah's eyes moved back to the scope. She reached down and detached it from the mount, wiped the casing clean with the cloth wrapped around her hand. The strip of faded tape still lined the bolt handle. It flaked slightly near the corners. No one else needed to see it, she said. Her voice didn't carry. She wasn't trying to convince him. She was stating the obvious. The sunshade she had made from salvaged rubber now lay beside the pack, carefully folded. It rattled once in the breeze before settling flat. The parapet still bore the pencil line she had etched days earlier. The trajectory ran clean through it, straight to the courtyard, No need for adjustments, no margin for error. It had been made before the shot was ever considered by command. One of the observers bent to look at the mark. He knelt beside it, ran his finger lightly over the groove in the concrete, and rose with a different expression. When he turned to the officer, his tone was less certain. She lined the shot in advance. By now, the ops channel had gone quiet. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence that comes after recalibration when something that wasn't supposed to happen not only happens, but proves itself correct. The command tent didn't reassert itself. No one called her name. The chatter pulled back into the background like it no longer applied. Leah pulled her rifle bag over one shoulder. The canvas brushed against her vest. The strap pushed aside her shoulder harness just enough to reveal the name patch beneath heart. L. The stitching faint, but legible now. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did and just didn't care. Another field agent arrived. This one older, slower, with the kind of walk that suggested rank without needing to flash it. His uniform bore no insignia visible from the front, but his boots were regulation black and polished despite the dust. He looked once at the rooftop, then at the downed body below, and finally, at Leah. He said nothing. After a long moment, he just nodded. A single, almost imperceptible nod, the kind that replaced entire briefings. No one saluted. No one issued commands. The shape of the moment had changed too much for that. Everyone standing there understood that something had shifted, even if they couldn't quite name it. Authority had been bypassed, but not broken. The chain hadn't snapped, it had been outpaced. Leah turned and walked toward the stairwell. Her boots pressed dust into the rooftop gravel. The sound light but steady. She didn't pause to speak. She didn't look back. There was no triumph in her stride, only finality. The radio cracked softly behind her. A new voice entered the command channel, its tone curious but tight. Who made that shot? There was a pause. Then, barely above the static, someone answered. Leah Hart. They didn't know what to do with her when she came down from the rooftop. No one had detained her. No one had formally called her in. But by the time she stepped into the forward operations center, every conversation paused. She wasn't wearing rank. Her badge still read, Support Diagnostics. Her gear was regulation gray. And yet, something in the air around her had shifted. Not heavy, just still. A captain near the main screen cleared his throat and gestured toward an empty seat beside the operations desk. She didn't sit. She rested her pack by the wall and removed her gloves slowly. Her fingertips were still faintly dusted from the parapet. No one gave her instructions. A few officers exchanged looks, but their language had collapsed. Phrases started and ended with soft nods. Nothing direct. Nothing loud. She stood near the back of the room. No questions were asked. Nothing needed to be. The ones who had seen the footage were quiet. The ones who hadn't looked like they didn't want to ask. A few minutes passed that way. Then one of the hostage team commanders stepped in from the outer hallway. He wasn't dressed for ceremony. His sleeves were rolled up, boots scuffed, belt uneven. He walked straight to Leah, stopped just short of arm's reach and offered a small nod. His eyes looked different than the others, clearer, like something in him had aligned. We made it out clean, he said. No one else saw him line up but you. She didn't respond at first. She looked past him, then down at the gloves in her hand. Then she gave a slight tilt of her head. Not refusal, just acceptance. He looked down at the gloves, then back at her eyes. Thank you. She didn't smile, but something behind her posture shifted. Just a fraction. Enough for him to take a breath, nod again, and step back through the hallway without another word. At the far terminal, a junior officer ran the scope footage on loop. One shot, center mass, no wind offset, no collateral. The tag next to it didn't say unauthorized. It had been changed. Now it read unscheduled. Behind the desk, A data officer leaned over to someone beside him and whispered, "Why wasn't she even on the roster?" No one answered. A senior officer, the same one who had pushed her off the rotation last year, stood at the edge of the boardroom glass. His hands were behind his back. He watched the footage without expression. When Leah turned slightly toward his direction, his eyes dropped to the floor. He didn't speak. He didn't meet her gaze. Leah stepped into the small armory annex without being asked. She returned the rifle, bolt open, barrel cleaned. The cloth she used was already folded and tucked into the side pouch. One round lay on the counter beside it, unfired. She picked it up, checked the casing, and dropped it into the tray with the others. A younger sniper watched from the corner. He had been in one of the Overwatch refresh groups 6 months ago. She remembered his hesitation on third movement targets. He had tightened up by the 4th rep. Now he stood perfectly still, not with doubt, but with recognition. There was no challenge in his eyes, only silence and a kind of quiet awe. She nodded once in his direction, not approval, just acknowledgement. She turned and walked back through the hallway. Her field log was strapped to the side of her pack. The page she had marked wasn't today's. It was blank, waiting for something that hadn't come yet. She didn't write down the shot. That entry wouldn't belong to the record. She had folded that page the night before and left it open. A placeholder. Not for what just happened, but for whatever came next. On the mission board by the main exit, names were still updating. Flight teams, drop sequences, urban containment grids. Her name wasn't there. It didn't need to be. The slot she had filled wasn't assigned. It had been taken, claimed, proven. A few personnel stepped aside as she passed. No salute, no comments, only distance, clearing without command. At one of the sidecom stations, someone leaned over the desk. Their mic was still open. The signal was idle, but the voice that came through was soft and deliberate. It wasn't a call-out. It wasn't a reprimand, just identification. Sniper Heart. She didn't turn around, but her pace slowed for half a second before she stepped out into the light. The room was quiet when she returned. Not sealed, not private, but quiet. The kind of quiet that meant no one was going to ask her anything. Not now. Probably not again. Leah set her pack down beside the cot, unclipped the side strap, and unzipped the main compartment. The rifle came out first. She didn't unsling it with flourish. She laid it gently across the blanket, then folded the netting and placed it beneath. Her gloves went beside the cot leg, aligned edge to edge. She didn't remove her boots. She just sat on the edge of the frame and exhaled once, short and dry. There was no exhaustion, just release. Outside, a generator hummed. Farther off, the perimeter lights buzzed under a soft wind. Inside, everything stayed still. She unfolded her rifle cleaning kit, slow and methodical. The cloth was still damp from earlier. She wiped the barrel again anyway. Residue, dust, the thin grit of rooftop gravel, it all came off in one clean pass. The bolt came free with a gentle click. She inspected it with a steady eye. It was perfect. Her logbook remained in her pack. She didn't reach for it. She wasn't going to write about the shot. There was nothing to explain. No version to record. No record to defend. The trigger had already spoken in full. She had nothing left to add. The cot creaked once as she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. The canvas tension shifted. Not a single thing on her gear had been reissued. Nothing replaced. She had maintained everything herself, as always. Near the foot of the cot, a folded range card sat half under her mat. She pulled it out, smoothed it flat, and reached for the pencil tucked behind her ear. A single red dot. That's all she added. No notation, no time code, no grid reference. Just a mark. Quiet and final. There were no orders waiting. No summons. The room didn't vibrate with upcoming motion. If anything, it felt suspended. Not paused, just slowed down long enough to let the weight settle. Her water glass on the shelf had a layer of dust inside it now. Fine. Soft. It had settled slowly across the surface over hours. She didn't touch it. She just watched it a moment. It felt like a reminder of everything else still drifting down. Unseen. A knock never came. No one interrupted. The message came through her comms unit instead, just a line of text from an unlisted sender. It read, "You were right. You were early. Thank you." She didn't reply. She read it once and powered the unit down. The cot sat in a room with no windows. The vents pushed warm air down the left wall. The shadows stayed angled low. No one checked in. No one hovered. The kind of silence that used to mean she'd been forgotten now felt like space being given. She placed the rifle across her thighs and rewrapped it with the netting. Her motions were deliberate, practiced, nothing wasted. The cloth from her father's old sleeve, still tied near the bolt, stayed in place. She didn't re-knot it. She didn't need to. There was no after-action briefing scheduled, no medal ceremony, no citation, only the shifting of conversations that no longer excluded her. She could hear it, even through the walls. The laughter had dulled. The sideways comments had vanished. The silence wasn't edge anymore. It was weight. It was presence. She tucked the range card under the cot leg. It would stay there until she needed it again. The pencil went into her left breast pocket. The cleaning kit zipped shut. From outside, someone passed in the hallway. Their steps slowed near her door, then continued on. She didn't look up. She didn't listen harder. She already knew they wouldn't knock. The cot creaked once more as she stood and pulled the gear back together. The sling draped softly over her shoulder. The shape of her rifle blurred with the netting wrapped tight, a familiar form returning to neutral. Her boots shifted across the floor, toe to heel. She stood near the door for a long moment, not out of hesitation, but because the room didn't ask anything of her anymore. It had seen the end of something. It didn't need her to name it. The cloth went back over the rifle. The water glass remained untouched. She reached to turn off the single light overhead, then stopped. She left it on. The room dimmed slightly as the exterior floodlight shifted. The line of dust along the sill moved half an inch, then stopped again. She was already ready. She hadn't pulled the trigger too early. She'd pulled it exactly when it mattered. The rest just came late. Leah never asked for recognition. She didn't need it. What she needed was space to see clearly, to move when others froze, to trust the instinct that had been sharpened in silence. They labeled her slow, too cautious. They removed her name from the board, but not from the line of fire. And when the moment came, she didn't wait for permission. She acted with quiet certainty, and in doing so, changed everything. This was a story about knowing your worth even when others don't, about doing what's right without needing applause, about standing still long enough to see what others miss. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Let us know what part stayed with you. And if you believe in stories that honor quiet strength and quiet courage, follow for more. The ones who move first are rarely the loudest, but they're often the ones who see it all.